Hi there, I'm Claire McDonald-Liu and this is the Family Health Lab. In today's conversation, I'm talking with esteemed cancer researcher, lecturer and author, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. Dr. Seyfried is a professor of biology, genetics and biochemistry at Boston College, Massachusetts, and author of over 150 peer-reviewed publications and his book, Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. Now, 1 in 2 of us are predicted to develop cancer, an increase that is down to our food and lifestyle, not our genetics. Cancer cells are ravenous for energy. Dr. Seyfried explains how depriving cancer of its fuel sources through techniques like ketosis and fasting is the key to starving cancer cells and finally making a breakthrough to reduce cancer deaths.
You're listening to the Family Health Lab. Healthy parents, healthy kids.
Hi, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
And what is it that gives cells the potential to become cancerous? Is there a kind of particular recipe?
We know clearly what causes cancer, and that was originally described by Otto Warburg in the 20s and 30s. He found clearly every cancer had a defect in oxidative phosphorylation, which is energy obtained through oxygen. And as a result of that, in order for the cell to survive, it had to rely on other forms of energy, which is energy without oxygen, which is called fermentation. We're working now, going back through what Otto Warburg had said, where he was correct and where he made some mistakes. But by and large, he was correct. All cancers start with chronic disruption of their ability to produce energy using oxygen. If it's too acute, of course, that will kill the cell and you'll never get a cancer from a dead cell. But if it's chronic over weeks, months, years, or whatever, more like years for humans, and the cell has the capacity to change from oxygen to energy without oxygen, then you run the risk of having dysregulated cell growth, which is cancer. And this can happen in any kind of a tissue, cell, or any place in the body, except we rarely, if ever, get cancer in cardiac myocytes from the heart or neurons of the brain. And the reason why is those cells cannot transition from energy from oxygen to energy without oxygen without dying. So there are cells in our body that rarely, if ever, get cancer, and that's the clue. What are the cells that get, as Warburg said, only cells that can make the transition from oxygen, energy through oxygen to energy without oxygen, which we call fermentation metabolism, energy without oxygen, only those cells can become cancer. Red blood cells that have no nucleus and no mitochondria cannot become tumor cells in mammals. So we know in order to have cancer, you have to have defective oxidative phosphorylation, and you have to have a nucleus so the cell is allowed to divide. And then the division of a cancer cell is out of control. It's called cell division out of control or dysregulated cell growth. That's what the definition of cancer is. Why is it dysregulated? Because the organelle that controls the energy metabolism in the cell is corrupted, and the cell falls back on ancient fermentation pathways. In order to understand cancer, one has to understand biological evolution. If people cannot understand biological evolution, then they remain profoundly ignorant of scientific concepts. And we understand biological evolution. And we understand that all life on Earth started without oxygen. So the cells that cancer is simply falling back on heirloom pathways that existed 2.5 billion years ago. So these cells are falling back on ancient fermentation pathways, and the organelle that controls the regulation is dysfunctional, the mitochondria that would normally get energy through oxygen. So the cell starts to grow in a dysregulated manner, and that's what we call cancer. And it feeds on fermentation fuels, which are the sugar glucose and the amino acid, glutamine. Those are the two predominant fermentable fuels. Now, both of them can be respired with oxygen, but if the organelle that does that is broken, like Warburg said, and like we have found and validated, then you can run the risk of getting dysregulated cell growth, which is cancer.
Which takes us all the way into your theory and your approach and how it differs. But you just hit on ancient pathways, and I'm just got me curious. How has cancer always existed? Is this? I know we're seeing phenomenal rates at the moment, but what's the history and the growth of the rates looking like?
Well, I think cancer has always existed, but in early man and in Paleolithic man and early civilizations, it was very, very rare, and apparently still is rare in human populations that live according to ancient and traditional ways. I guess Albert Schweitzer, the physician humanitarian, looked at African tribes and he said cancer was extremely rare in human tribal populations that lived according to ancient and traditional ways. The Inuits, so the Eskimos, very rare. Cancer was very rare. Native Americans, extremely rare. Cancer became more and more common as Western diets and lifestyles entered into into our societies, and lack of exercise, poorly nutritious food, stress, sleep disorders, everything we have today in our society are cancer-generating events. Cancer is linked to the obesity epidemic. We stopped smoking, of course, that lowered the trajectory a little bit, but now obesity is taken up the place where smoking took off. And if you smoke and if you're obese and smoke with sleep apnea, man, you have probably ground zero for some dysregulated cell growth. Type 2 diabetes, obesity, all these kinds of things cause inflammation and damage chronically to the mitochondria and the organelle that produces energy, and thereby you run the risk of getting cancer. It's not surprising. It's absolutely predictable. We as a species evolved in a food-restricted environment. We had to expend enormous amounts of energy during Paleolithic periods to track down, kill animals, dig up roots. Whatever we tried to eat, we had to expend tremendous energy, and none of the foods that we were eating in those periods of our existence were highly processed carbohydrates. So it's very clear what's causing this. It's the mass production of highly processed carbohydrates, minimal exercise, stress, poor sleep. That's the cancer lifestyle.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
And it's permeated all of major Western societies. And as the result, I mean, this is not surprising. The problem is, what is anybody going to do about it? And the answer is not much.
it's an important topic for us all, and to hear that we're not doing much about it, or we're not enough about it. I mean, that brings me on to how we're doing with our treatment, how we're doing with our research. We have a multi-billion-dollar business internationally. It's a huge employer. It's at an industrial level in terms of research and treatment, and in hospitals, and all of the infrastructure around cancer, and particularly around cancer research. I mean, I was looking at the numbers before our chat, and they're mind blowing. The millions in some countries and billions in others that's being spent in this area. But how do you feel we're making progress? And are we making progress in any areas?
Well, I don't want to say no area, but certainly not in any major way. Well, the death rate keeps going up. The incidence keeps going up. You're right about the treatments. Basically, they're medieval slash burn, poison people in the name of trying to help them. We all know this. People fear the treatments more than anything else. And I'll tell you the reason. And I think the most important role for cancer is keeping so many people employed. And so many industries generating huge revenue, right? I mean, you just mentioned all the billions and billions of dollars. It's amazing. People don't seem to be outraged. They don't seem to care. Okay, everybody's making billions and billions of dollars on sick cancer patients, and we're getting more and more cancer, and more people are dying. So for the industries, I think it's really, when you look at the future, it looks very bright for cancer revenue generation. Maybe not so good for the patient, but certainly for the industry. As you said, the projections for the next 20 or 30 years are phenomenal. The amount of money that will be generated from attempting to treat cancer patients, mostly failures. All the new drugs that are coming out are largely failures. And I'll tell you the reason why we're failing, because the theory under which the disorder is recognized is foundationally incorrect. It's not a genetic disease. It's a mitochondrial metabolic disease, and it's very easily prevented and managed. But the populations in whatever country you're in don't care. They say they care, but then they go out and run and raise money for breast cancer and lung cancer and all this. And they give the money to the same guys perpetuating the problem. Don't these people understand that the more they run for cancer, breast cancer, the more breast cancer and lung cancer and all the colon cancer you're going to get? So all you have to do is look at the scientific advisory boards of all the national cancer institutes and the private foundations that say they're doing something, and you find out that almost every one of them thinks cancer is a genetic disease. So when you're out raising money, you're actually perpetuating the problem. This is people. I can't believe they could be so naive to think that running for their dead relative who died from breast cancer and raising money for the very organization they're perpetuating the problem is going to solve the problem. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense to me. There's a question I was going to ask you, actually. It's when you see the bake sale, raising money for the cancer, when you see the Breast for Life run events, and I love events that get people out, active, engaged in their community, like the color of pink. It's phenomenal. But when you see the sweet counter at the cancer research events, they're selling candies and sweets to raise money for cancer. I was going to ask, I mean, I think it's crazy. I take photos of it, and when people ask me to donate over a long period of time, I've refused to donate to those type of charities. And I do not understand, like you're saying.
What it is a lack of scientific literacy. What you're dealing with is a worldwide lack of scientific literacy. They have no clue about evolutionary biology. If they did, they wouldn't be doing these crazy things.
Well, for me, it was simply that realization many years ago that sugar is a fuel, it's an accelerant. And then you think, well, how can you be giving it on an oncology ward and encouraging the second piece of cake? How can you be selling candy at your research event? You're looking for that cure everywhere. You've got your team, you've got your $1 billion institute and lab set up. And where is it? But have some sugar and we'll try and find it for you. But we're accelerating it. It's like
it's a tragedy.
Amnesia. It's a tragedy. So do you buy the cakes? Do you donate?
It's just, and then you run and give money to the very people that are actually pushing the false hopes and the false information.
False hopes, and people are trying to do something about it, and they're raising these funds, but it's misinformed in my view. But it's fascinating that you.
Yeah, that's actually part of the problem, because how can everybody's top governments, cancer institutes be incorrect? How could all the goodwill of these millions of people running and jumping be misplaced, misdirected? How is it possible? And the answer is the lack of scientific literacy is the reason. It is absolutely clear that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disorder. Okay, it's not a genetic disease at all. And yet all of the major therapies that are coming down, CAR T, immunotherapy, Keytruda, Opdivo, and Avastin, they're all based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer, that cancer is a genetic disease. The National Cancer Institute in the United States say cancer is 100 different diseases, all controlled by different gene mutations. Our National Cancer Institute in the United States says this. Nothing could be further from the truth. And the people who have no scientific literacy listen to this, and then they go to the oncologists who perpetuate the same crap, and the next thing you know, these poor people are being brutalized. And then we did everything we could. Yeah, you did everything you could to kill the poor bastard. You know, I hate to use these terminologies, but bottom line is that in the United States, we have 1,700 people a day dying from cancer. That's about 70 an hour. Can you believe this? And every night we see advertisements telling everyone that if you take Opdivo and Keytruda and all these these are based on the somatic mutation. They're perpetuating the problem. And not only that, some of these drugs will kill you before the cancer does. And nobody seems to be concerned about it. They rush off and they say, oh, my doctor is so smart. He doesn't know jack about the biology of the disease that and it's not his fault. A lot of these guys mean well. But they're in the medical schools, they were brainwashed, indoctrinated into think cancer is a genetic disease. Thereby, these anti-angiogenic and immunotherapies seem reasonable based on the brainwashing that the field had. Otto Warburg had this absolutely correct centuries ago. We have validated in our research program here at Boston College exactly what Warburg said, except that he didn't know about another fermentation fuel that we now know about, which is the fermentation of glutamine, an amino acid fermentation. I published this. We have hard scientific evidence, but you know those monkeys, they don't want to hear about stuff. They don't want to look about stuff. That's the way the field is. They're so comfortable in the status quo of making enormous amounts of money on the status quo. Nobody wants to change this. And then the poor cancer patient is led around by their nose with a ring in it to this guy, to that guy. And they're by the grace of God, they survive brutal medieval treatments. And then if they survive, they have to then, oftentimes, not always, they have to be confronted by all kinds of secondary ailments for having survived brutal, poisonous, and radiation and surgical mutilations. But everybody seems to be okay with it. I don't know what it is. It's like a world mesmerization, tranquilization of the brain. It's like, when the hell are you people going to understand this is a metabolic disease and you have a lot of control over both prevention and treatment?
That's a key point as well, that we do have a lot of control. So the numbers we're talking, you mentioned the death rates daily deaths in the US. I mean, the figures are frightening. 20 million cases in 2022 worldwide, new cases. That's predicted to go up by 77% by 2050. figures, I mean, the death rate is insane, and the breakthroughs and the new treatments are not touching that, despite the billions and billions of dollars. So, but I think that point is really, really fascinating, that you're saying that we do have a lot of control over our risk of getting cancer, but also we have more options in terms of managing cancer as well. And so we'll come on to your approach. But you've mentioned Otto Warburg a few times, and I've looked at him, and he's been mentioned in your talks a number of times, and in other people's talks, Dom D'Agostino, and he's a person who in the 20s, he's a fascinating character by the sounds of it, but in 20s and 30s he was prolific with his science research and came upon this theory. Didn't come up, he researched it, and it was something to do with sea urchins. But can you tell us a bit more about the theory, and then what's happened to it? Have we neglected it completely, for example, in training our medical students?
Yeah, well, Warburg was fascinated with cancer early in his career, in the 1920s. But he made some errors that we now know were made. He was obsessive about quantification of data, collection, measurements. He was a meticulous person who could measure stuff. So he studied energy metabolism in normal tissue and in sea urchins and these kinds of things, and characterized how energy is produced in normal cells and tissues from organisms that were normal, did not have cancer. So he felt quite competent in his understanding of energy metabolism. And then he realized that oxygen was the driver of majority of energy. And he noticed in all of his tumor cells and tissues that oxygen consumption was always lower in the tumor tissue than in the normal tissue. And he always noticed that the production of a fermentation waste product, which was lactic acid, was always higher in the tumor tissue than in the normal tissue. And he knew that if oxygen was deprived of normal tissue, they also produced this waste product called lactic acid. As a matter of fact, when you run fast, you'll build up lactic acid because the muscles can't generate. They work so fast that the amount of oxygen is insufficient for generating ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the chemical currency of energy. So they had to fall back on a fermentation pathway, which is energy without oxygen, and lactic acid is the indicator of energy without oxygen. Also, when people have a heart attack, when you stop breathing because your heart starts pumping, your bloodstream fills up not only with lactic acid, but also with a second waste product of fermentation, which is succinic acid. These are acids that are wasted, dumped into the bloodstream because they cannot be effectively metabolized for energy, because the oxygen that facilitates this is now restricted because of the heart attack. So it was known for years that when you have a heart attack, lactic acid and succinic acid build up because oxygen is not there to serve as an acceptor of electrons to drive the synthesis of ATP. Warburg and others knew that cancer cells, even in 100% oxygen, continue to throw out this waste product. And now we're realizing cancer cells also throw out succinic acid. Succinic acid is a waste product of amino acid fermentation. And we have now shown that amino acid, which everybody thought was respired, is actually fermented. So cancer cells are telling us by their waste, by the release of waste products, exactly what's going on inside the cell. They're telling us clearly. The cancer cell is telling us we're suffocating. We can't get energy from oxygen, but we can get energy from fermentation using these fermentable fuels, which essentially is glucose. Glucose, the sugar, is metabolized normally to CO2 and water, but in cancer cells, that process is broken, and you get lactic acid in the bloodstream outside the cell and whatever. And now we know succinic acid, which is indication of a amino acid fermentation. The cancer cell is telling us exactly what it's doing to stay alive. It's fermenting. It's using fuels that don't require oxygen. It's telling us in no uncertain terms, if you want to kill me, you have to take away my fermentable fuels. We have tried this in our press pulse therapeutic strategy for managing cancer and in mouse and humans, and it works. The problem is the entire cancer industry is locked into the thinking it's a genetic disorder. So why waste any time with energy or any of the stuff that I'm saying that Warburg said? Why waste time? It's a genetic. So you're brainwashed into thinking the disorder is something other than what it actually is. But it's very profitable to think that. So you have to understand that cancer as a disease is extremely profitable. The status quo will be held. Why would you want to change to target the two fuels driving the dysregulated cell growth, which can be done very cheaply and very effectively without toxicity? Why do you want to do that? You're going to upset the apple cart of profitability for this whole thing. We've trained all these physicians in medical schools throughout the world to think cancer is a genetic disease. All of the top cancer centers throughout the Western world are all focused on the same crazy stuff, all based on an incorrect theory. This goes back, you want to know this, the parallelism of what we're dealing today from the past. For over 1,800 years, the people thought that the Earth was immovable in the center of the solar system. For 1,800 years, Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo came along with hard scientific evidence and said, no, the Earth moves, and it's one of the number of planets that circles the sun. The sun is. It took 1,800 years, and they attacked. The scientists thought it was okay, but the Bible said it cannot be okay. Can you imagine this, falling back on some crazy stuff written in a Bible, thinking, I'm sorry if I piss people off. The bottom line, it's not a scientific documentation. You gotta get over it. But yet crazy stuff like that inhibits our ability to move forward as a rational thinking species that we are. So we're locked in now to thinking that cancer is a genetic disease, okay? So when you have a genetic disease and everybody's making profit on it and you think you're going to solve the problem, you're not solving the problem. People are going to die and suffer. And it's so convenient. Our technology has outpaced our biology. We have automobiles. We don't have to walk and harvest. We have sit-in tractors to harvest food. We're not working as hard as we used to when we were farmers. We had a lot more energy, a lot more nutritious foods. Now, the world is locked into mass distribution of highly processed foods that have long shelf life. Some of it's genetically engineered. Obesity is rampant everywhere. And then you're wondering why we have a cancer problem? I mean, what's going on here? You tell me. I mean, listen, I've been around for a while. You know, I've looked at a lot of bullshit in my life, but there's nothing greater than the amount of bullshit in this whole cancer industry. And as long as people are comfortable with it, as long as they feel that they're being treated effectively by the system, then status quo will maintain and nothing's going to change. So how many people are going to become scientifically literate? How many people are going to understand what's driving their dysregulated cell growth? And what's more important, what they can do as an individual to both prevent cancer and as well as facilitate the treatment once they would be diagnosed with it.
A cancer cell is a cell that's dividing, and it's built up certain mistakes in its genetics, in its genes, and then it proliferates. But it's doing that, all of them, there's lots of different types of cancer, but underneath all of that, they need, like any cell in the body, they need fuel. Otherwise, they can't do that. They can't continue to proliferate, and they grow at a large rate, and they're hungry for fuel, very, very hungry. Which is why when they're looking for cancer, they use something called a PET scan, and the body will light up, areas will light up at the body where potential cancer growth is, because those cells in the body are using or sucking in much more glucose than other cells. So that's so we've known about the link for sugar for a very, very long time. In preparation for this chat with you, Thomas, I put out a few different polls on different groups that I run, and also on Facebook groups, and asked for some feedback about what causes cancer to grow. And the vast majority of people said sugar, and lots of people talked about processed foods. And other things came in, talking about stress and lack of exercise, lack of sleep, good kind of health generally. But in terms of fueling cancer, it's very well known in the wider population that sugar processed food is a problem. But then we do have a dissonance where we'll then eat it and we'll buy it at a cancer morning tea party to raise money to find it. So we have this crazy dissonance. But you're talking about a theory that's I think it's really, really important to kind of just get clear that that since that theory of Warburg that came out in the 20s and 30s, and he won a Nobel Prize for his research.
It was for the discovery of cytochrome C. It's the protein in the mitochondria that allows the cell to get energy from oxygen.
And his theory then has become neglected. This theory of how a cancer cell is fueled. And it's really important because while we're off busy with our billions and our scientists and our labs and all of our technology looking for the cure for individual genetic components of different cancers as they change, and there's multiple factors in each cancer, you're saying we have an Achilles heel really to cancer as a whole, where we can take cancer down by taking away the fuel it needs, and it dies without it, or at least it's extremely damaged. And so there's twofold. You could potentially kill cancer with your theory in a less toxic way than we're currently managing, less damaging to the body, which is just amazing to hear. But also for those cancers that we maybe can't kill in their entirety, we could maybe use the other treatments that we have developed over time, but we'd need less toxicity in the body. We'd need to do less damage to the body. So it's fascinating how this Achilles heel isn't being utilised at all. And you're saying you've been working on looking at your research papers. I mean, you've got many different research papers over the decades you've worked in cancer research, and before that, epilepsy as well, and as a researcher. But you've been talking about this specific theory, looking at papers that you've written I was looking at papers you've written in 2010, 12, 14, presentations you've given, decades of telling us about this theory with all of these millions and billions floating around for research. It's absolutely amazing that this hasn't been taken seriously and more research isn't being done.
Yeah, well, that's the great head scratcher, the great mystery. But it's not a mystery. When you have an ideology, look at all the people, not all, but many of the folks that are pushing all these billions in type of research and gene sequencing and all this, they're all indoctrinated. They think cancer is a genetic disease. And when you tell them it's not, they walk away. You can't get a person of one religion to drop the religion and immediately embrace another religion. You can't do that because the brain has been indoctrinated. Once you're indoctrinated into a worldview, almost nothing can change the way you think. And the somatic mutation theory, which is the current theory driving all of the research, a majority of the research in all the different countries, at least the major academic grants, at least the treatments that are being pushed in the hospitals, are all extremely expensive, and they're not working for the majority of people. I mean, they keep you alive another 2 or 3 months in a miserable state. And you pay a lot of money for this. And they're all saying, oh no, this is immoral. What the field is doing to people is actually immoral. They're treating people with therapies that are based on an incorrect theory. It's one thing to say I'm profoundly ignorant, I didn't know what Seyfried was saying. It's another thing to say that I know what he's saying, but I'm sorry I can't do it. Then you're immoral, because that tells you you're just doing it for the money. You're not doing it to help anybody. or you choose not to look at the evidence. I mean, you want to know when you stop oxidative phosphorylation, you die quick. Everything is energy. That's why when somebody would drink cyanide or take cyanide, which is a blocker of oxidative phosphorylation, you die very quickly. They always call it drinking the Kool-Aid because it was laced with cyanide, and people drink this Kool-Aid laced with cyanide, you die very quick. Cancer cells don't die in cyanide. They can live and produce energy in cyanide because they're not using oxygen as a fuel. I mean, if that's not a wake-up call, why don't they understand that? Now, the other thing is they can't burn fatty acids and ketone bodies. We have a big paper we just published showing that all the cancer cells accumulate fatty acids and big lipid droplets in the cytoplasm because if they try to burn they'll die. So they store them as a protective mechanism because they can't burn them. So that tells you right there. You want to manage cancer, you lower the blood sugar, you target the glutamine gingerly, and you you put your body into a state of nutritional ketosis, which is low sugar, elevated ketones and fatty acids, and the tumor cells will get hammered, and they'll slowly degrade. And yes, as you mentioned, yes, at the very end of the treatment, we may need a little bit, a touch of radiation here, a small amount of chemo there, or maybe one of those immunotherapies here, as a final cleansing to get rid of the few straggling tumor cells that may be hanging around that's actually survived metabolic therapy. But why is metabolic therapy not first and foremost as the treatment protocol for every cancer patient? We have not found a tumor anywhere, and I have looked deeply, and I published papers on this, that can survive without the glucose and the glutamine. So as long as you can target those two fuels and transition the body over to a fuel the tumor cells can't use, they choke on it, then you know how to kill cancer and manage. I just told you the solution to the cancer problem in just a few words. And then you'll go down and go to your top medical schools and tell them what you just heard. And they'll say, no clinical trials. Oh, I didn't hear that. How come nobody ever told me about it? Because you don't read the damn literature like I do. And others. And it's a hard nut to crack. You got a whole international industry based on this false impression that cancer is a genetic disease. How's that working out for the majority of people on the planet? Not good, right? Yep. Okay. Bad. Well, I just told you the solution to the problem. And then tomorrow you're going to see all these folks out there running for breast cancer, colon cancer, raising money for the very institution that's putting them in, that's keep maintaining the status quo. Also, all the cancers are very similar. You're right. The Achilles heel is they're locked into a fermentation metabolism. They can't get out of that. Their oxidative energy is deficient, and that's breast, colon. All the major cancers have the same problem. All of them have different genetic profiles. Every major cancer and cells within the tumor all have different genetic mutations. So why are we spending all of our time targeting the unique differences that differ from every cell rather than what all the cells have in common? They're all fermenters. They all can't. So this makes no sense. To me, I go nuts. I said, what's going on with these people? What am I might as well be talking to the plug socket over there on the wall because the response I get from the plug socket is no different than what I get from the NCI. So it's like, what is going on? Is everybody tranquilized? They're like zombies out there. I mean, I don't know what's going on. It's one of the great mysteries of life. Why doesn't somebody figure out that?
If it wasn't so cruel to us, it would be funny. We're missing this. Yeah, but
this is what we call this. We call it gallows humor. You know, we're talking about the lives of millions of people worldwide that are being brutalized by a system that's happy with the status quo. And people are contributing money to the status quo as if something's going to change. It ain't going to change. As long as they continue to think cancer is a genetic disease, we're going to have the death rate will be much higher. The incidence of cancer will be much greater. And as I said, well, people are really interested in preventing cancer. You'd very rarely find an obese person walking around. Don't they know that obesity puts you at super high risk for cancer? Sleep apnea, obesity, type 2 diabetes. The governments of the world aren't telling people that you're putting your lives at risk. However, it's an extremely profitable industry that supports a lot of the success of industrialized countries. But there's got to be some in between where people can do better and somebody can still make a profit on this. There has to be some. We're not saying, well, let's throw out everything we know about what we're doing, but let's make sure that it's related to the theory that drives the dysregulated cell growth, which is a shift from oxidative phosphorylation to substrate level phosphorylation. In technical terms, is what I just gave you. That's the problem here. But after a while, I get frustrated. I talk to these people, like millions of people. They all, wow, this guy really thinks, and then they go to their oncology and get slapped down. Like this guy understands what's going on, right? I mean, look at we have 1,700 people, all these dead people. Obviously, somebody doesn't know what's happening.
So could you tell us about the two fuels and how we're getting them and what we can do about them? You've mentioned your process to tackle this, and it's a twofold system, isn't it? But the reason I mentioned fatty acids was because people have said and that cancer is, I mean, it's a it may look for a different fuel after those two if we take away those two fuels. So fatty acids is not an option.
No, I tested it. We tested it. We looked at all. That's what I'm saying. All major cancers store fatty acids and lipid droplets in the cytoplasm. Now, the absurdity of the field, they say, oh, the fatty acids are there because they're needed as fuel. No, they're not. When the mitochondria become dysfunctional, immediately fatty acids accumulate in the cytoplasm of the cell. That means they're not being used. They can't be used. People say, oh, some cancers can use fatty acids. No, they can't. I tested this. I looked at it. These are the people that don't think carefully. They don't read the scientific literature, nor do they understand it. We can't find any tumor cell that can grow on fatty acids or ketone bodies in the absence of glucose and glutamine. The other two fuels are always present. So when you add fatty acids and you have these glucose and glutamine, the tumor cell actually can grow sometimes faster. But it's because the fatty acids are facilitating the use of the glucose and glutamine. It's not because the fatty acids are. If you take away glucose and glutamine and give the tumor cell fatty acids, it drops dead. It dies. It can't use the fatty acids. So I looked into this. We have papers published on this. But guess what? They don't want to read these papers. And if they do, they ignore it. It's clear. And I throw out there, show me cells that can survive on fatty acids when glucose and glutamine are not in the mix, right? And nobody. So why don't you target the two fuels that are absolutely essential for the dysregulated cell growth? Now, the glutamine, of course, is an amino acid that's absolutely essential for our immune system, our gut, and a lot of other things. So you can't be stupid about how to target glutamine. You got to know you got to be strategic. And how do you become strategic? You understand the biology and biochemistry of the problem you're dealing with. You don't want to harm your gut. You don't want to paralyze your immune system because you need these things to be healthy and to kill cancer cells. So you really need to understand biology. And if you don't understand the biology of organ systems, different kinds of cells, how they operate, how they evolved, what they do, then you don't really understand how to manage the disease. You've got to know all that in a complete package. And unfortunately, the medical students are not trained to think like this. They're never exposed to the information that I'm sharing with you, right? They go into the medical school. They're told cancer is a genetic disease. We need to surgically take out chunks of somebody's tissue. I mean, we're not saying surgery is not involved, but if we shrink the tumor down to the size of a wart when it was much bigger, and the surgeon can come in and debulk it or remove it very, very, very cleanly without causing major harm, then that's good, and that's what we think can happen. Not what they're doing today. Going in there, we can shrink those tumors down real small with metabolic therapy, and get rid of them. But you also have to realize, which people need to know, that they become a major participant in the management of their disease. They're no longer some bystander in the whole process. This whole concept of someone they're battling their disease. No, they're not. They're sitting there being nuked and poisoned, and they don't have any. We're relying on the doctors. We got 1,700 people a day relying on these guys, 70 an hour being brutalized. Yeah, it's not like dying from heart attack. Cancer, you die miserably because your body is so beat up from the medieval treatments that they're giving you. And each one, we have a new clinical trial, all based on the somatic mutation theory, more dead people coming in. I mean, it's just it'll go down, no question. Mark me, I won't live to see it. This cancer thing will be the greatest tragedy in the history of medicine, bar none, because we know how to manage the disease effectively without toxicity, and very few people. I don't know of a single clinical trial or hospital anywhere on the planet that is simultaneously targeting glucose and glutamine while transitioning the body off to nutritional ketosis. It's not there. And I just told you the solution to the cancer problem, and nobody's doing it. So what do you say? Oh, I must be wrong because confirmation bias. Everybody knows cancer is a genetic disease. Who's this crazy guy telling us it's not a genetic disease? You'll come to know someday.
So in terms of the research that's going on, and I mean, you have referred to, in some of your talks, you've referred to colleagues around the world, internationally, maybe in Turkey or Istanbul, and other institutes that are doing as part of this process, is tackling cancer as a metabolic disease, not perhaps with the full process, the twofold process, in the particular dose and order that we'd like to see, but your process, your approach carried out. But who is doing what in this area in terms of treating cancer as a metabolic disease, not a genetic disease? Which is the differentiation you're talking about?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that we put these billions and billions of dollars into the genome projects, the Cancer Genome Project, with the hope of personalized medicine, precision therapies. This was supposed to eliminate the medieval radiation and poisonous chemicals. The reason why we continue with radiation and poisonous chemicals is because the hope of the genome projects never materialized, despite the billions and billions of dollars. So we must stay with the medieval procedures. So now we bring in new therapies based on the genome, which is the immunotherapies. They sound very sexy. Wow, precision medicine. We're going to use Opdivo, Keytruda, CAR-T, and all these kinds of things that are going to go in and strategically. Yeah, if you have a cancer cell where all of the markers on the surface are similar and the immunotherapy targets that, you could potentially end up with a resolution of the cancer. The problem is many of your normal tissues and organs have that same epitope. And you can blow out your liver, your kidneys, cardiovascular. You can do a lot of damage to your body by using some of the we call it hyperprogressive disease, where the treatment causes the death of the patient faster than the cancer would if you didn't do anything to it. So ask about hyperprogressive disease. It's well documented in the scientific literature. They don't talk about it, but they do. I don't know about Australia, but in the United States, we advertise all these cancer therapies on television. All right, but they do. They spend about 20% of the advertisement is telling you how wonderful this drug is, and about 80% they're telling you how it can kill you, in so many different ways. So they're not hiding anything. They're clearly the companies that are making these drugs are clearly telling you that there's a good probability you're going to be dead from the drug that we think is going to help you. So they're not hiding anything. But people, okay. Then they go down. And this is what I talk when you talk about scientific. If you're scientifically illiterate, then you have no clue what these guys are telling you. But they're not hiding anything. They're telling you this drug could potentially kill you. Why would you treat anybody with anything that has a potential? And metabolic therapy won't kill you. And the only problem is it gets rid of your diabetes, your high blood pressure, hypertension, along with the cancer. So, I mean, those are the collateral effects of metabolic therapy. Not only do you get rid of your cancer, you get rid of a lot of other things that are linked to a chronic diet lifestyle. Of course, no, we don't want that. God forbid that gets out and people start using that. What are you talking about? This is nuts. This is like heresy here. So, but any event, when you understand the biology and you spend decades and decades understanding cell and systems biology, and what Warburg said, and I tracked down everything, translated his papers from German to English and had big student discussions about this, find out where he made his mistakes, how we cleared it up. And we're moving forward now with a very clear plan of how to manage cancer without toxicity. The press pulse therapeutic strategy I wrote it is with some of my Dominic D'Agostino and Joe Maroon and George Yu. It's a framework for the eventual standard of care for cancer patients. Do the cancer patients have to shoulder a lot of the burden of their treatment? Yes, they have to become empowered. They're no longer bystanders. And what we see is that those folks that understand the science and take a deep dive into what they're doing and why they're doing it, they do good. They really do well. The patients who say, well, I don't really want to bring myself into ketosis, blah, 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 they're finished. They should go and do the radiation and chemo. Forget about it. And listen, you can drag the horse to the water, but you can't force him to drink. They always say things like that. But the bottom line is that the patient who is engaged and understands the concepts do the best with metabolic therapy. I'm not saying, we have millions of cancer survivors from just the standard treatments. But as I told you before, they pay a big price for this. I mean, they have all kinds of adverse and health problems. They have gut issues. They have hormonal issues, neuropsychiatric problems, bone density issues. And bottom line, they don't live long. They don't live as long as they could, even if they survive cancer. And sometimes those cancers come back. It's a recurrent tumor. What do you mean it's a recurrent tumor, man? You should have put that fire out a long time ago. And then, of course, when you try to do metabolic therapy after your body's been beat to hell by poison and radiation and surgical mutilations, you've already taken the advantage away from your body. It's an incredible healing machine. It's an incredible healing machine. You got to allow your body to heal that, and you got to work with your own cell, the normal cells, because the normal cells then actually engage with the cancer cells. They facilitate the indirect starvation of the tumor cells, because the normal cells will suck up those fuels before the tumor cell gets them. And if you have a healthy body, your body will actually work together with metabolic therapy to attack and dissolve the tumors. Can you believe this? It's called autolytic cannibalism, where the body turns on the tumor and uses the metabolites inside the tumor to fuel the rest of the body. So you need to know the biology of the systems, evolutionary biology and all this kind of stuff, if you really want to manage your cancer. You just can't rely. You can't take your precious soul and turn it over to an establishment that has a misunderstanding of the very nature of the disorder that you have. So, and consequently, it's a worldwide problem, not going away. People better wise up, and unless they don't care. If they don't care, then what are you going to do?
Well, I think they do care. It's just overwhelming. And we have a long history of putting our trust in our doctor, in our specialists, in our hospitals, in our government, and almost particularly in those large institutions that have done the evidence, they've done this research for us. And we as populations, that is the history. And then people who are coming into this, because they have a family member or themselves have a diagnosis, then there's so much research. There's, so much is thrown at them. You're given the advice about how this is going to be treated. You're looking up those treatments, terminology that's new to you, medications that's new, looking up alternatives. And then the alternative field is just another, huge bag and different protocols. So it's an enormous learning curve.
But how is that working out? How is the trust? We need to trust. Our governments are absolutely fantastic in many things. And in some forms of medical treatment, like cardiovascular disorder, they've made in orthopedics, and they made enormous advances. We're not claiming that all of these guys, we're talking specifically about cancer. We're not talking about the massive achievements and wonderful advances they've made in other fields of medicine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this one specific disease called cancer, and its two theories are driving the research and the treatment. And one is called the somatic mutation theory, and the other called is the mitochondrial metabolic theory. Initially started by Otto Warburg, and now we advance this concept, and others are recognizing. There's a lot of people that recognize this. The problem is it's not being implemented in clinical trials the correct way. It's not filtering down to the hospitals that should be treating their patients this way. Those hospitals are based on the drugs and the power of the pharmaceutical industries to continue to push this nonsense. And as I said, we've got 1,700 people a day in the United States dying, and it's getting worse and worse every year. So unless you're comfortable with the status quo, unless you think you understand cancer, then don't do anything. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Just ignore me. Don't wish you never heard what I'm saying. Go back and read Otto Warburg or something like this. It's just, I'm just telling you, I'm the one, I'm the messenger telling you if you want to get yourself in order and manage cancer, you got to consider metabolic therapy and blended therapies. And yet your oncologists, if they don't know about this, and the other problem is many of the oncologists would love to do this. But they can't. The system prevents them. They have to do a standard of care first, which is radiation, chemo, and all this stuff. Why? Why do they have to do that? It's not working for the majority of people. And if it does work, these poor folks pay a price for it. So why do they not want to do this? Because it's a disruptive technology. Status quo is where it's at, baby. And you got to stay with the status quo.
And you've been in other fields where we've had to use the status quo, like epilepsy, before we could use metabolic therapy.
Yeah, that was another thing. We knew Wilder from 1921 realized that ketogenic diets, he actually was fasting people who had epilepsy, and the seizures went away. But, you can only fast somebody for so long before you kill them. So he said, let's do a ketogenic diet and see if we could recreate the metabolic biology of what goes on during water-only fasting. And that was a widely used treatment until drugs came along in the 1930s, various anti-cancer drugs. And, my colleagues at Johns Hopkins were arguing we should be doing ketogenic metabolic therapy on little kids first before we give them pharmacy. Oh, yeah. How do you think that went over? Not good. So even today, when you go to the epilepsy, now there's ketogenic diet epilepsy for little kids. And then the other people in the cancer field, you hear people say, oh, that ketogenic diet is very dangerous. You got to be careful. We're treating thousands and thousands of little kids around the globe with ketogenic diets for epilepsy. And now all of a sudden you have cancer and it's dangerous? What, relative to radiation and chemo? I mean, people don't think, give me a break. I mean, give me a break. Well, you're going to be irradiated and poisoned and you think that's more, not as harmful as just switching your diet? I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is unbelievable. But when people are told, when people have very little or scientifically illiterate, they're willing to believe all of these guys, thinking you put a nice white coat on and a tie, and you sit in a nice office. This guy must know what he's talking about. And in many cases, they do, but mostly not in the cancer field.
It's a stark warning to get ourselves informed all the way along. Now, when I was growing up, my grandma was diagnosed with cancer, and at that time in the early 90s, you didn't even really talk much about cancer. It was a bit of the word was a bit taboo still, and I don't know how many were predicted to get cancer at that time, but then later on, a decade or so later, it was 1 in 4, and now 1 in 2 of us. And the increase that's predicted that I mentioned earlier of like 77% new cases predicted of the next decades, it's just we are going in the wrong direction. So what is the pathway forward? We've got these opposing theories. Genetics has led the way for decades. Everything, all our infrastructure, but also our treatment protocols and our treatments are built around a theory that's based on the genetics of your specific type of cancer. Nobody is tackling and taking away the fuel that feeds your cancer. And I've, even more so, I've heard you say that some of these treatments actually exacerbate by accelerating because they're propelling glucose and glutamine to the cancer cell, which is absolutely just so shocking when I heard you talking on those matters.
I know you'll hear me talking on a lot because I live, sleep, and eat this stuff. I read the scientific literature, and I look and I compare and contrast, and I do this all the time, day and night. And you're right. The frustration is unbelievable. I mean, you irradiate somebody, the blood sugar goes through the roof. Your body is under threat. Whenever you're under threat, your hormones turn on. Because you feel like you're going to be, you need to the fight flight response, and you poison people, and glutamine is going up. And I mean, it's like nuts. And I see this, and then they say, "Oh, we did everything we could to say you did everything you did to kill the poor guy." Without your knowing it and thinking. And the problem is you think you're doing good. This is the crazy stuff. So why is the medical? Because they're not trained. They're not told they don't read the scientific literature like I do. They don't know the biology like I do. Okay, when you know the biology and you read the scientific literature, it becomes very clear what's driving the dysregulated cell growth.
Are you passionate about the groundbreaking and heroic research of Dr. Thomas Seyfried on metabolic therapy and cancer? So are we. That's why we've created something special for you, in collaboration with Johnny Rockermeyer, a German book publisher and translator. Introducing our collection of meticulously crafted books that distill the essence of Dr. Seyfried's work. Dive into the science and discoveries. These summary books are your gateway to understanding the intricate world of metabolic ketogenic therapy in a clear, concise, and engaging way. Whether you're new to the subject or a seasoned enthusiast, our books offer insights that can change your life. Ready to explore this transformative knowledge? Visit our website at www.cancerasametabolicdisease.com to get your copy. You can buy the ebook there directly and the paper book via the provided links. Here's the best part. A portion of every purchase goes directly to support Dr. Thomas Seyfried's groundbreaking research. That's why the direct ebook purchase is the best option to donate as much as possible. You can see all of the donations Mr. Rockermeyer has already made at www.ketoforcancer.net. That's right, when you buy our books, you're not just investing in your own knowledge, you're also contributing to the future of cancer research. Help us make a difference. Together, we can drive change and save lives.
And we've looked in this. We've interrogated cancer cells to find out exactly what they need to grow. And they need these two fuels. And you're right, a lot of the treatments they give you, especially for brain tumors, glioblastoma, I mean, we have not made one single advance in 100 years in glioblastoma. I tell people, you've got the Webb telescope a million miles from Earth looking at the origin of the universe. And you're telling me we have not made one advance in saving people's lives? In 1926, the brain cancer survival was 8 to 14 months. In 2024, it's 8 to 16 months. What are you kidding me? Why? Because you're doing the same stupid thing you've been doing for decades without changing anything. And you don't want to hear anything new about the biology of the problem. It's extremely profitable to treat glioblastoma by standard of care. I don't want to change that. And yet we slaughter all these poor people. It's like, give me a break. I mean, at some point, somebody's going to have to say something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want people to think that I'm coming here with a cure for cancer. Cure is an arrogant term. We have no clue whether metabolic therapy is going to cure you. We know it's not going to kill you, but we have no idea whether, if you were cancer diagnosed in your 40s and you die in 96 years old from a heart attack, then you obviously were cured. Your cancer never came back. But metabolic, like Pablo Kelly from Devon, England, he has a glioblastoma, and he's out 10 years this month with survival. Is he cured? No, his cancer is still there in his brain. He has it cut out every 3 or 4 years, but it's growing very slow and it's indolent. Had he done standard of care, he would have been dead years ago. So we're not saying that metabolic therapy will cure cancer. We're just saying metabolic therapy offers you an alternative for managing your cancer. You should have the choice to choose that path or go for standard of care or whatever you think. It should be the patient's choice rather than the system, which has a failed track record telling you what you should do. It'd be one thing if they had great success. But how's 1,700 people a day dying from cancer? How is that considered success? Like you said, Claire, look at how many people are supposed to die from this in the coming years based on what we're doing. This has failed. This is a failure of monumental proportions. So people better get on, better start recognizing. All I'm doing is I'm the messenger. I'm just telling you, you got to start thinking about how all this works. Otherwise, you're going to be a statistic.
Going back to your risks then, before a diagnosis, I mean, the number of us that will be diagnosed in our lifetime now due to our lifestyle predominantly rather than our genetics, which we can say safely with 90 to 95% of cancers are actually they're caused by environmental factors rather than genetic factors, which I think is a big misconception. I don't know what you think. I think a lot of the public and now in the establishment talk obviously about the genetic components, and I read more and more and more about that. But there's a lot we can do ourselves, isn't there, to prevent diagnosis?
Well, what we did with there's two types of genetics. There's germline inheritance, where you can inherit a risk factor from one generation to the next. And then there's the somatic mutations, which occur in the cancer cell as it develops. And those mutations in the nucleus of the tumor cell somatically come from the damage to the oxidative phosphorylation system in the mitochondria. So they're effects. But BRCA1 mutation and Li-Fraumeni and these inherited genes that people say, oh, it's a genetic disease. Yeah, but how does it? No cancer can happen without damage to oxidative phosphorylation, chronic. And we found that every major genetic risk factor damages oxidative phosphorylation, putting that cancer on the path to shift to fermentation. So even the genetic risk factor, and none of them are 100% penetrant, meaning that there's no gene that when you have it, you're destined to have the disease. The highest is Li-Fraumeni with about 80%. But there's no 100%, not like Huntington's disease and some of these other diseases that are 100% penetrant, not cancer. So cancer is predominantly an environmental lifestyle problem, causing damage to the ability of a cell in a particular tissue to shift from oxidative phosphorylation to substrate level or fermentation, basically. So these are the things that you need to know, and how to prevent that. Here's the situation: it's very, very difficult to get cancer if you keep your mitochondria healthy. Okay. People should know what the mitochondria of the cell is, because that's their destiny. That determines how long you will live on the planet. Mitochondrial health is what allows us the longevity that we have. And all species have a particular lifespan, right? People think that, when we were in the Paleolithic period, most of our ancestors as a species for over 1 million years, what killed us was injury and infections, not cancer, type 2 diabetes. We died from infections because we had no vaccines, and we died from broken bones and injuries and things like that. But now we've managed many of those things. We've got vaccines and therapies against various infections. We have antibiotics, and we have all this. We have wonderful orthopedics to fix broken bones, to keep our more active for a longer period of time. But we also now subject ourselves to massive doses of highly processed carbohydrate foods, sitting in traffic, getting all freaked out and angry about something, creating stress, increasing hormonal imbalances, raising glucose, creating inflammation, poor sleep, poor diets. This is the cancer calling card. And how would you prevent cancer? Avoid obesity, avoid type 2 diabetes, get better sleep. Make friends, get socially active. All of these kinds of things reduce risk for cancer. And I know I have to sit in traffic like a lot of people in major cities, and I can understand. You're sitting there, you're looking at some guy who just cut you off. That creates an unpleasant feeling, but you've got to find ways to relax. and people sitting in front of cell phones all day long, computers all day long, go out and sit in traffic all day long, run home, try to throw something into a microwave that's, packaged. Nobody's eating organic, natural foods like we did in the past. We're not working on farms as much as the people did in the past. So all of these things come together, and the consequences are obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and let's throw in dementia as well. So our technology as a species has far outpaced our biology. We are still biologically living in the Paleolithic period of our existence, where we had a lot of activity, very little carbohydrate, processed carbs in our diets for years, and the grains that we developed during the Neolithic period of our existence were more natural. They weren't engineered kinds of things. They had a lot of nutrition associated with them. That's how we built societies and cities around food. Nutritious food, and we had to work, and we had a lot of energy. And now all of a sudden we're in a completely different environment. And the more technology, what people love, we don't have to. I mean, people like technology for sure. Boy, that food tasting is just unbelievable. You ever eat a chalupa? Did you ever have some of these hamburgers that they have now? Oh my God, they're mouth-watering. But they're full of like processed stuff. But
they're designed. Designed to be appealing in
wonderful.
all ways, and marketing as well. Yeah,
and then you wonder why you have cancer and diabetes and all this stuff. It's not surprising. Why? It's not. You have to think evolutionary biology, who we are as a species, where we came from. What about our ancestors? What about the great apes like the chimps and the gorillas? They don't get cancer. They're sitting in an environment of natural. The experiment they don't allow to be done. I always tell people on these podcasts, why don't you take a bunch of chimpanzees and give them a lot of donuts and pizza and Coca-Cola every day, and stress them out, like, put a lion next to them. They're going to go nuts, not in there, but let them see it. They get all freaked out, and give them our diet and lifestyle with a lot of stress and see what happens to these guys. There's never been a documented case of breast cancer in a female chimpanzee, and breast cancer is now overtaking heart disease for humans, in the United States. So I'm saying, man, it's all diet and lifestyle. And you put yourself at risk. And if you live according to traditional ways, but who wants to live according to traditional ways where you have all these excesses in the environment? I mean, it's a battle. But as long as you know about it, then you at least can make choices.
You've mentioned ketosis as a preventative factor for the tribes at the very beginning of our chat. And you mentioned ketosis and you talk about crappy carbs. And I just think it's worth, I'm a nutritionist, and nutrition is a big part of what I talk about and I'm interested in. But in terms of cancer, it is an enormous factor. There was a Lancet review, was it 2023, broad review, systematic review, and that showed that just 10% increase in your regular intake of ultra-processed foods, which is the stuff in a packet with lots of ingredients. But it's the stuff in your most families' cupboards. It's we're talking their breads, their cereals, their jarred sauces, their microwave dinner, their packet noodles. The stuff that they're putting in packs for their kids to take to their school. It looks normal because it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But just a 10% increase increases risk of cancer significantly, 13% overall cancer. But some of the big cancers, breast cancer, increases your risk of that by 11%. Pancreatic cancer, 50%, which is quite a deadly cancer. So food is significant. We're not just saying lifestyle changes and kind of being obscure about that. It's very specific that we know that this increase 1 in 2, it wasn't when I was growing up. It wasn't, in your decades of research, it wasn't 1 in 2. We've headed there because of our food system.
Yeah, and
We've
also
a
lack of exercise. Lack of
exercise and insulin resistance. And diabetes. 80% of people with cancer on their diagnosis of cancer have pre-diabetes or impaired glucose, or they have diabetes. 80%. I don't think people know that. And obesity, did you say earlier, has now overtaken smoking as the biggest risk factor?
And not only that, when you see little kids that are obese, 5 and 7-year-old kids. This is parental neglect. Don't these parents understand that their failure to monitor their child's diet and lifestyle is putting that child at risk for a truncated lifespan? Do they not know this?
Again, the dissonance and the not understanding how to do it. And then some people live in food deserts, but the information coming, I'm, fed my children healthily, and you feed your children healthily to what you know is healthy. And I've learned, that I've made mistakes along the way. The homemade sweet date treats that I was cooking, because they were all preparing, because they were all natural. I was super sugaring, loading them with natural sugar, which is, it has an impact on the body.
Yeah.
And you learn, but then you send them to school. I mean, our children, I went to the assembly a few months ago, and I was like so shocked. Like, oh, we're delighted with this classroom. They've got the best attendance. We would like to reward them with a Domino's pizza. I'm like, you are kidding me. And so you've got the state against parents and their food environment. But I know what you're saying. We ultimately, we've got to take all action that we possibly can that's within our hands to address it.
Yeah. Again, there has to be some level of knowledge. And I know there's so much misinformation that poor person hears this and that, and they say, oh, this is good for you, that's not good for you. They say it's good, then they say it's not good. And it's so much misinformation pushed at you. The only thing you need to know is keep your mitochondria healthy. If you can keep your mitochondria healthy, and you say, well, how do I keep my mitochondria? Don't eat much.
I was going to
ask. Don't eat for 3 days. Your mitochondria are super healthy.
Autophagy. That's how it works.
So people say, is there anything else I can do besides not eat for 3 days? Something easier to do.
Initially, if you want to get healthier, then there's it's stages, isn't it? Depending on what stage you're at and how serious. I mean, if you're at diagnosis stage, you'd be wanting to talk ketosis pretty quickly, get your head around fasting and ketosis.
Oh yeah.
But if you're
ketosis, but don't forget, as a species, we lived in ketosis. We were constantly in ketosis. We had a lot of energy, very little food, zero processed carbohydrates. Think about it. We, over hundreds of thousands of years of our existence, we lived in ketosis. We evolved to starve. And now we have this abundance of carbs, and we have an obesity epidemic, a cancer epidemic, a diabetes epidemic. And this, if you want to know about biological evolution, all you have to do is look around and see the obesity epidemic. Obesity is biological evolution in action. That's your evidence that biological evolution is where we came from, and species evolved. And the fact that we're in a new environment puts us at massive risk, because most of our existence as a species was in a starved environment, and our mitochondria were super healthy. But now we have all the abundances that we've always craved at our fingertips everywhere, and we pay a price for that. And that price is diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, dementia, and all of the various chronic diseases that we can think of.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And, bringing it back to healthy mitochondria, there's actions that we can take. So because 90 to 95% is shown to be environmental, and it's this, it is the sleep as well. It is the exercise, but diet is an enormous chunk of it. The food we put in our mouths every day is phenomenally important, and how we manage our, stress and
it's amazing. It's amazing we live as long as we do, considering how we abuse our body. I know. Somebody lived to be 80 years old, just constantly abusing it, but you got to take your hat off to that guy. Some people smoke and drink and eat all that stuff. They're super fat, and they still make it to 80. It's unbelievable. So, but not. It takes a really lot to bruise your body to get cancer.
Yeah, and there's we do have to. Our body is designed to fight it off. It's designed to get rid of those and clear out those damaged cells. So I would be really interested to know what keeps you motivated, because you said you live this, you work through the night, you research, your rates of talks that you give and podcasts that you kindly give your time to, interviews that you give, and also these research papers that you pore over and then produce yourselves, and that your book as well, your fantastic comprehensive book. So what keeps you motivated? Is this personal to you?
I think it's a mission. I mean, when you have a clear idea of what's going on, and I use my students to make sure I'm not crazy, because their job is to make sure that our concepts, when you read the science and you understand it, what am I missing here? What piece of the puzzle do I not understand? And the answer is we can't. Nobody's proving me wrong. They're not saying, "Oh, this guy is completely wrong." Where's the science that says I'm wrong? They're not, because the science that I have is solid. It's rock solid. It was started by Otto Warburg, and we've just simply built upon that. So these guys were giants in the field of biochemistry and science, and chemistry. And we're proving these guys now. They made mistakes, of course, but because the information wasn't available at that time. But now that it is, they are the platform, and we're just building on that platform with newer evidence to support it. So the science is rock solid. The problem is we have interfering issues that either move people away from the science or try to confound the science. Even my own field, don't think that all of you can argue with people who say, "Oh no, he's wrong. Mitochondria are perfectly healthy." No, they're not. Show me. I'll look at my papers and you show me where I'm wrong about that. Oh, I didn't see that paper. Well, how could you not see that paper? It's one thing for the guy on the street not to see the paper. It's another thing for the guy in the field not to know about what I said. And they don't attack. They stand away from it. And a lot of people are locked into their departments, and they don't want to disturb the grant funding agencies. People have to get grants to do the same crap that everybody else does. Everybody follows the leader, and what the leader says, everybody does that. Other way, they're not going to survive. It takes time. I understand. Listen, it took 1,800 years for the world to realize that the sun was the center of the solar system. If we have to wait another 1,800 years before they realize that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease, then maybe we'll all be dead of cancer before anybody comes to realize what we're saying, because it's got to stop. This tragedy has got to stop, and it can. But there's got to be entrepreneurs out there. There's got to be people to make this whole process move in the right direction. And the other thing that kills me is that people raise money for breast cancer, colon cancer. They all think their cancer is something different from everybody else's cancer. It's one disease. No, I don't care where it comes from, whether it's a colon, a breast, a bladder. They all ferment. They all have the same problem. So we should not have breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer societies. There should be one society. Unite the tribes. You got to unite the tribes. It's one disease, common to all the different tissues. And once people realize that, breast should merge with lung, should merge with colon, and a worldwide organization to come together and say cancer is one singular disease of energy metabolism. It might start in some guy's brain, another person's breast, somebody's bladder, somebody's colon. It's the same damn disease. It's driven by fermentation metabolism. So why don't we have a singular treatment strategy that will manage the majority of cancers? Until those concepts become more widely recognized, we're going to be stumbling around with these crazy clinical trials based on an incorrect theory with no significant improvement in overall well-being of the population. So I don't know. I mean, you're doing your job, letting people hear what I have to say. But if people really want to know, they should read the papers that we publish, open access. You can go. Our research is supported, not surprisingly, by private foundations and philanthropy. In my earlier years, of course, the federal government supported a lot of my research, but it wasn't designed at that time to have a clinical benefit. It was pure what we call basic research, basic scientific research. It didn't have a translation or clinical application. But once you start doing that, then you rock the boat, and things are. There's a lot of hostility in the cancer field. about who's right, who's not right. There's a lot of, it's very different from some other fields. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the money involved. Maybe it's the egos and the power. But whatever it is, it can't last. Otherwise, we have too many dead people suffering enormously, and that has to stop.
Looking at other fields, the epilepsy field, then the diabetes and obesity and weight fields, and now these mental health, psychiatry, but metabolic solutions. All of those fields have had to really slog it out over a very long period of time, over entrenched views that metabolic health is totally separate to mental health or psychiatric health or diabetes. Isn't an issue with carbohydrate intolerance, for example, and we touched on epilepsy. So, but yeah, I mean, this sounds bigger because the entire theory is and all of the infrastructure is all based around the genetic theory. But in terms of people getting informed and following your work or getting involved in some way, how can they follow you? How can they find you in your work?
They make donations to my biology department at the university at Boston College. They support Travis Christofferson's foundation. I send them kits of information. More and more people are reaching out. I just wish that we have training. I wish the hospitals would have trained people in knowing how to do metabolic certification. People who should be certified. They should have a training program that's certified by those of us that really know what to do and how to do it. We want to train physicians to do this. So when you go to get metabolic therapy, you're being not by some charlatan, some quack who doesn't know anything about science is treating people. And that's another thing you have to always be careful about, because whenever you transition from one field to another, there's always those exploiters that try to make it look like they know what they're talking about. Just read my scientific papers and get a feel and understand the science, so you're not illiterate when it comes to understanding the concepts. And then you'll know pretty much whether some guy knows what he's talking about or not. And I know some of the papers might not be easily digested by the people in the field or that in the lay public. But I tell you, when people have cancer, you'd be surprised how smart they become in the shortest period of time. I wish my students would embrace the knowledge that fast.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. I've seen people who've got their head around so much information, picked protocols, including ketosis, cooked their own food. I know a family who actually bought a camper van so that when she was having chemo treatment, her husband would cook her an omelette, bring it up to her in the ward rather than have the ward food and the extra piece of cake and all the biscuits that the staff were pushing on them. It blows my mind what people have done and have achieved themselves. But you're pushing to change a whole industry and change a protocol.
Well, we also built the glucose ketone index calculator to allow every person to know whether they're in the right zone. So in other words, how do I know I'm in ketosis? Well, the blood work from a finger prick can tell you right away whether you're in nutritional ketosis, which is a ratio of 2.0 or below, the ratio of glucose to ketones in the blood. And the Keto Mojo meter, which is available by Amazon, people are buying that. There's also the free Libra blood monitor on the arm. There's new technologies that are coming out that can allow apps on the phone to know whether you're in ketosis or not. All of these things are becoming available for the cancer patient to know what they can and cannot eat, which differs from one person to the next.
Completely.
So it's not like, what can I eat? I don't know. You might eat something different. What does it do to your glucose ketone index, your GKI? And it says, it's throwing it. Well, don't eat that. It's not that hard to know. So all of these things are tools that can allow the patient to better understand where they stand with respect to their mitochondrial health. Just remember, a low GKI, the mitochondria are humming with excitation because they're getting very, very healthy with a low GKI number. That's how we evolved. That's who we were as a species, low GKI. We didn't have any of these chronic diseases. We had other issues, but we didn't have chronic diseases. Do we want to go back? I'm not saying go back and live in a cave, but all I'm saying is that you have a tool to allow you to know whether your diet and lifestyle is putting you in a pristine state of health.
But thank you so much for making this your mission in life. And I can see clearly that it's been a mission from looking at your talks, your book, all your papers, decades and decades of work, and trying to warn us and trying to support people to have another option.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.